Welcome to another episode of Grateful by Lady Law, where I interview the people in my life who have been mentors, educators, friends, companions, my whole support system. Today, I am lucky enough to have Chris Lathrop, attorney, with me, and he's an attorney and many more things. So, Chris and I have known each other for how long has it been?
Yeah, it's gotta be 17 years.
Yeah, at least 17 years. So when I got started working at the public defender's office in Sarpy County is when I first got to know Chris. Um, but it actually started, I think we met when I was working at Hotman O'Brien and I was working with three of your brothers, Matt, Steve, and Dave Lathrop, all attorneys. And I think in just some sort of social party or event, or you just come into the office every once in a while, um, I met you, and we, were introduced. And then in law school, I was a law clerk, and I had talked to the guys at Hotman O'Brien, the attorneys, and I had told them I wanted to practice in the courtroom. And they told me if I wanted a lot of courtroom experience, that I needed to go to the public defender's office, and that you were there, and that I'd get great courtroom experience at being a public defender. So my first interview at the public defender's office in Sarpy County, I was sitting in the interview area or in the lobby area. And I remember you walking through and then you saw me and you literally backed up, did a double take, and you said, "What did you do to get in trouble?" And it made me laugh so hard. And I had to explain to you that I was actually there for an interview, that I wanted to be a law clerk. And so that kind of was just the beginning of a great mentorship and friendship. You're one of the very most important people in my life, Chris. I wanted to have you here today so that viewers and listeners could get to know a little bit more about you, what makes you tick, what makes you who you are, and just to explain to people how you've motivated me and you've made a difference in my life. And you've truly made me a better lawyer because of being able to work alongside you. We've had some great cases together, and I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. You game?
Yep, I sure am.
Okay.
You're very kind too, by the way.
It's all true.
Yes.
So one of the things that I'd like to know is how did you get started at the public defender's office?
Um, well, when I got out of high school, I went to Creighton for a couple of years. By mutual agreement, Creighton and I decided that we should go in different directions. And so I went into the service. And when I got out of the service, so it didn't take me long once I got into the service to realize that isn't what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And growing up, my father was an attorney, and I have three brothers that are attorneys, as you said. That was kind of the natural course for a Lathrop to take, and I decided that that would be something I'd like to pursue. So I got out of the service, went back to UNO, and graduated in 3 years, and then went to Creighton to law school. When I got out of law school, I was clerking for my brothers at Hotman O'Brien. And I think it was kind of a mutual thing where we decided, well, we both agreed that getting some courtroom experience would be nice. The type of law that they practiced was personal injury work. And I didn't really have a desire to be in any specific area of the law. So I thought exploring the criminal justice system a little bit would be fun. And I got a job at the public defender's office in Douglas County and really, really enjoyed the work. I had a great mentor down there, Tom Riley, who's still there. And after a long time, he's been the public defender in Douglas County for over 30 years, I think. But a great attorney, great leader. And really understands the job that we do and taught it to me. After I was there for about 2 years, I was offered a job with the Sarpy County Public Defender's Office. It was a part-time position back then. It was in 1998. I came down here, did that for a couple of years. It allowed me to have a private practice and start a private practice up. So I started a private practice where I did some business law and some criminal defense work. Really missed making money, so I tried to get rid of the public defender work and go all private stuff, but really missed being involved in the criminal justice system on a professional level. I wanted to make sure that I did something I like, because if you do something you enjoy, you never really go to work, right? We always want to find that job that makes us feel the most complete. And for me, criminal defense work did. I immediately was able to understand what my job was there. My job was not to get people off of criminal charges or defend them to the point of being dishonest. It was to get in there and make sure that they understood what was going on. My clients, my goal for the entire almost 30 years I've been doing this is to make sure that my clients understand what's going on, what their choices are, the consequences to those choices, and how the law applies to their case and what facts are good and bad for them. If I do that and I educate my client about their position and what they get to do or what their choices are, then I've done my job. Their actions dictate the ultimate outcome, but that all happens before they get to me. And I don't think in 30 years I've ever met somebody who I thought was evil or horrible. I've met a lot of people that have made some really bad decisions, and a lot of people that suffer from mental illness and alcohol and drug abuse, and families of origin that weren't as good as some other people's. It's a combination of things that caused this behavior. It's not being evil. I think evil is a name we give things we don't understand. But if you sat down and talked to them, they've done incredibly horrible things. But most of them just make bad decisions,
Right.
and weren't taught how to make good ones.
And that's one thing that I remember starting out as a law clerk and following you around as I did is I remember going down to the regional center in Lincoln, and we met with a couple people, some of your clients there. And I just remember the way you spoke to those clients. You weren't judging them. And you weren't judging them by their behaviors or by their crimes that they committed. And I remember just the way that you would talk to them on a human level, and that stuck with me. And that's how I know that I wanted to exemplify that when I was, talking with all of my clients.
Yep, it's not the easiest thing to do.
Right.
It's quite often I get asked, how can you represent people who do the things that they're accused of doing? I said, I don't look at the actions, I look at the person. I got to make sure that they understand what the charge is, make sure they understand how the state has to prove that, what defenses there are to the charge that they're under, and what facts are good and bad for them.
Right.
It's not me making things up or conniving. It is really just being honest and letting the system take its course.
And having a good understanding of what your role in the system is.
Right.
And a role as a public defender or criminal defense attorney is that person, regardless of who's paying your salary, that person deserves a defense, and that's what you're providing them.
Correct.
Right.
And a lot of my clients have a hard time seeing that. I could tell them that over and over when we're sitting in a room talking to each other or on the telephone. But when it becomes really apparent to them is when we're in the courtroom. And I'm not joking around with the prosecutors or the police officers or the sheriffs that are in the courtroom. I'm very serious. I made sure that I maintain a very professional attitude and demeanor towards everybody in the courtroom. But I argue and I fight. My clients know that. And if you talk to the guys sitting in the jail, they all say that Lathrop's one of those guys that fights.
Right.
And that's what I want to do for all of my clients.
Which reminds me, when I started in the public defender's office, that I was told that you were the bulldog of the courthouse, that you were going to fight. And I thought that reputation, to have that reputation, you have to earn it. And you have to try cases, and you have to push back, but you have to do it with some level of respect. And that's what you've done. But the other side that I saw from you, so you were the bulldog out there, but I also saw a side of you of extreme kindness and being completely genuine. And one of the times that I saw that was when you took me on the first tour of the courthouse. And so we're going behind, closed doors that most people don't get to go into. And so we're going into the clerk's office, the county clerk's office, the district court clerk's office, where there's people that are working there that are the ones that are pushing the paper and keeping the judges' schedules and doing all those things. And that's a really tedious, hard job for, those people, mainly women. But there's a few great guys that work in those roles too. And I remember you saying, look behind this counter. And I was like, okay, I see all these people working. He goes, those are the people that make this courthouse run. And the way that you treat them is of the utmost importance. And you have to always treat them with respect. And then I saw you do that time and time and time again. And that's made such a big difference in my practice too. I learned, with that, I've learned, when I'm dealing with secretaries and paralegals and clerks and, all of that, the way that you treat them matters. And you get more bees with honey, like you're going to definitely, you get treated the way that you treat other people. And I think this isn't significant because I have seen many attorneys do the opposite. They act like those, the clerks work for them and they, want something immediately and they are demanding and rude and condescending. And I've never once seen you act like that. And, I try to, try to model that in every one of my interactions. So thank you for being that model for me. And I'm sure,
You're welcome.
yeah. And I'm sure you've probably, some of these things that you've, who you are, has to be because of somebody that's modeled for you. Is that, have you had role models? Have you had people in your life that?
Oh, yeah, many. Tom Riley's one I mentioned
Yeah.
when I first started working in the criminal defense area, but I would go all the way back to my mom. My dad passed away when I was 15. She raised the last 3 of the 9 kids by herself.
Wow.
It was always very genuine and always very honest with us, and very compassionate and kind. And I don't think I ever heard her say a bad word about anybody in my entire life. So it was, that was really what I tried to emulate in my everyday life. Sometimes I do it very poorly. Sometimes I do it very well.
No one's perfect, even you.
I know, but it's really probably her. And then a work ethic. When I was 12 years old, I started my first job. I worked at a horse stable, mucking stalls. And I did that 12 hours a day for $10 a day and thought I was sitting on top of a pile of money at summer. It was a lot of fun. And Howard Serlin, the gentleman who ran that stable, he taught me how to work hard. He taught me that if you work hard, good things happen. And Howard had a very successful business for a long time. Yeah. I'm kind of losing my voice here.
You've been sick, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I need a drink of water. I don't spill this on myself.
I know. It's kind of tricky around the microphone. So I know you've worked shoveling shit in a horse stable,
Yeah.
right? I'll say the word. And you've had some other jobs that really taught work ethic, right?
Well, I would have to say, when I turned 16, I got a job at Baker's Supermarkets as a customer service person. First you get taught how to bag groceries, and Abe Baker taught me how to bag groceries. Abe was the founder of the local grocery store here in town. And he says the customers are always right, and they're the most important people in the store, so treat them that way. And that was the first time. And then some of the managers I had when I was working there were very important. Steve Seitz, Charlie Brown, a guy named Charlie Brown was huge. He really showed me that no matter who you are, you can always work harder.
Yeah.
Charlie did. Dick Schaefer, all the managers I had while I was at Lonnie Eggers, those guys taught me that customers are always right and they're the most important people. And I take that into my job now.
Yeah.
Because really I'm providing the customer service, right? I want to make sure that my clients understand that I appreciate them even though they've been appointed to me, and we're kind of stuck with each other.
Right.
That's always a choice that they get to make, whether they go hire an attorney or stay with the public defender. Most of them don't have that choice, but understand that I do care about them as human beings, regardless of what they're charged with,
Right.
or what they've been convicted of in the past.
I know one of the aspects of the criminal justice system that you hold near and dear to your heart is the problem-solving courts.
Yes.
And so for the listeners that don't really know what a problem-solving court is, can you explain it and then kind of talk about your role in it?
Well, sure. And I think it's in the big picture of things, a crime happens and because somebody makes a bad decision. Sometimes it's because they make bad decisions in general, but sometimes it's their circumstances. And the circumstances can be their home life, the opportunities that they were presented with or didn't get presented with, lead them to a position or a path where they make bad decisions. In my opinion, and based on my 30 years of experience in the criminal justice system, that crime is just a symptom of a problem. And unless we address the actual problem, the symptom's going to persist. No matter how long we put them in jail or prison or anything else, it won't change unless the problem is addressed. The problem-solving courts is to get to the root of that problem, right?
Right.
We've done tough on crime since the 60s. We're going to put everybody in jail who
Definitely.
breaks the law. And all we've done is build a lot of prisons and put a lot of people in prison.
And it becomes a rotating door.
Yes, because now you're a convicted felon and now you can't get a job. Or, we're over convicting and over convicted people of felonies to the detriment of everyone in our society. It limits their resources and what they can access and what they can do. So the problem-solving courts try to address those issues. We try and, if there's a substance or mental health issue, we try to address those, help them get to resources, guide them, because sometimes it's just unlearning some very bad habits. And hopefully when they're done with the program, they go out and they don't commit any more crimes. We've had a drug court in Sarpy County for probably 15 years, I want to say. In the last 7 years, we have started a reentry court, which was really legislated into existence by the legislature, which is to help people transition from the penitentiary and back into normal life, whatever normal is for the people. And then we started a mental health court about 3 years ago.
That's a big one. Was so needed, right?
Yeah. So like 30 years ago when I started, I would tell people if it wasn't for alcohol and drugs and relationships, I wouldn't have a problem.
Right.
I wouldn't have a job.
Right. Exactly.
Now it is really mental health. Mental health is the cornerstone of 90% of my clients' issues.
And I think that there's a reason for that, right? The regional centers closing in Nebraska recently.
Well, it wasn't recently, but now we're harvesting the benefit. We're reaping those.
Time for it to trickle.
Right. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they shut the regional centers down where they were housing a lot of people. And quite frankly, they were never a good idea. Housing and storing people with mental illnesses is not the way to treat them. But they shut them down, and they promised that once we shut these places down, that we'll invest in the communities and get resources into the communities to help these people so that they can integrate back into society. And those promises weren't kept. The resources aren't there. Right now, slowly, we are starting to get some resources, but it's only because the problem has gotten so big.
And so with this, like the mental health court, there's several people that sit at the table, right? Who are some of the people that play a role in the court?
Well, I am in there as a public defender to just kind of make sure that the due process rights of the participants aren't violated. I represent everybody. I have an attorney-client privilege with everybody that's in the court. There's a prosecutor from the county attorney's office that sits on the team. The team is run by a district court judge. Right now in Sarpy County, it's Judge Martinez. And then probation is the supervision of the participants. They supervise the participants. So there's a supervising officer, an assistant probation officer, and then the probation coordinator for the drug court team or the wellness court team or the reentry court team also sits in on those. In addition to those main people, each of those courts has a separate group of providers. So we have a relationship with Lutheran Family Services that's pretty good. We send some people to Lutheran Family Services so the providers are able to come into the staffings we have every week and let us know that the participants showing up, they have goals and they're working on their goals. Mm-hmm. They don't talk about or reveal anything that's discussed in the therapy sessions, but they let us know that they are participating because that's really the hard part. There's also a med management component to it. If there is if we're in wellness court, there's usually med management. We're very fortunate that there's a fellowship being developed between with Sarpy County and the University of Nebraska Med Center. We have a psychiatrist rather, that is part of the team from that fellowship.
That's huge.
It is, because she's able to say, well, we understand there's going to be a med change that that may or may not work.
Here,
right. And we have to be patient. We're trying, especially in the wellness court, we're trying to support the caregivers, right? We're trying to support all the Lutheran Family Services that are providing the treatment and the psychiatrists that are prescribing the medications. Support to encourage our clients to participate in their treatment. It's really where you get the most pushback. Hoping that once they get medically stable with medication if necessary, that they can then begin to change the way they think and the way that they make decisions. So ultimately, that's what gets them in the most trouble.
Right.
Yeah. So it's quite the challenge because you can't change somebody's behavior, especially somebody who's in their 30s or 40s,
right,
in 9 months, right? This takes years to do. And there's got to be a cost benefit to it. It would be much more efficient if these services were provided when the first onset of a mental illness comes into play, rather than waiting till people get into trouble. Right. So that investment in the resources in the community, that's where it's needed, right? So that we can identify in elementary school or middle school or high school people that are experiencing mental health issues, right, or predisposed to it, or in traumatic situations that are likely to cause mental health issues. So the sooner you address it, the better off the outcome is.
Right. That makes sense.
Right.
So for the participants that go through these mental health or drug courts and they're successful, their charges are dismissed. Is that correct?
Correct. So in order to get into one of the problem-solving courts, except for reentry court, they're all voluntary. The 3 are voluntary. If you enter the program, then you have to enter a plea to a felony charge. If you are successfully complete the program, then the charges are dismissed and your record is sealed, which is huge.
That is huge.
Yeah, because you're not a convicted felon.
Right.
Unfortunately, if you're not successfully, you don't successfully complete the program, then you end up having a felony conviction on your record.
Yeah, that's
and likely more time in prison.
Yeah. Hopefully, that's a big motivation for a lot of people.
You would hope so.
Yeah. I got to work in drug court when I was in the public defender's office, and the change that occurred for so many people through that program was amazing. And the way that the team collaborated with the judge and the prosecutor and the counselors and, all of the people, probation officers sitting at a table. For me, it was Monday mornings. That's how we started our week. And, we'd fight and we'd, hash things out. But at the end of the day, every single person at that table really was wanting the same thing. And it was truly, it seemed like genuinely everybody wanted those clients to succeed. Even, the prosecutors weren't wanting the conviction. They really wanted this to work, is what I saw most of the time.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the prosecutors that were getting into the problem-solving courts now do.
Yeah.
They want to see success. Termination usually only happens when they put the public at risk or themselves or another participant. So some criminal behavior that might be cause injury to other people. Generally is the only thing that will get people terminated from the program, or if they just aren't moving.
Right.
Sometimes they get to a certain level and they stagnate and they can't make any progress. There's some patience, but at the end of the day, they don't want you in there more than you would be in or on a probation for a felony, which would be about 5 years. It's the maximum probation allowed for a felony conviction.
Right. You can relate to some of the people in the court system, not because you've had any criminal charges, but kind of with the substance abuse piece, right?
Yeah. Yes. I had criminal charges. I spent some time in jail. It's not anything I brag about, but it adds to my life experience.
Right.
Because each of us are the sum total of our life experiences. I have been in recovery for a long time, decades. Every day I'm grateful for that.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, and I try to make sure that I touch that a little bit when I'm talking to my clients, because it kind of gives us something in common most of the time.
That gives you credibility. I
Yes.
mean, if you're speaking to a therapist that's been through what you've been through, it makes a difference. And just to have an attorney that actually knows how it feels to have those struggles, I think that makes all the difference in the world for so many of your clients. I've witnessed firsthand your, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like your loyalty or your conviction with your sobriety. And it's very clear in getting to know you that that was one of the most important parts of your life, and that you realized that you needed to. You had to make that a priority in order to be successful.
Yes.
And I think that's very clear. And yeah,
But for the grace of God, you can
Right.
be my lawyer.
right,
Yes.
right. So I think that was important to touch on, because a lot of people struggle with issues like that too, and it was nothing that you've ever hidden from anyone.
No. I don't.
Yeah. Another huge thing about you, Chris, that I want to make sure my listeners know about is the fact that you do major cases. So we talk about how you're the bulldog in the courtroom, but that's because you get huge cases. And you've taken cases to trial for murder, sexual assault, just some really big cases that you're not pleading people out. You're fighting to the end. And you and I actually got to have a murder trial together when I started out as a law clerk. And that changed my life.
Yeah.
And so just the way that you handled yourself in the courtroom, those are just the things that I picked up on. And that trial was very, very interesting for me. It was a second-degree murder trial, and our client got convicted, even though we worked so hard. And that, I mean, you put your blood, your sweat, your tears. I remember the way you interacted with our client, and that's when I first saw, this man is being charged with murder, and you treated him like a human being. And we would visit him in the jail, and you would ask him how he's doing, and you would listen to all of his concerns, and you would explain very thoroughly what we were trying to do without giving him false promises. And then he was convicted, but then we appealed the case, and we ended up getting it overturned.
Yes. I did.
Yeah. And so when he was convicted, he was sentenced to 80 years in prison.
Yep.
And he was 45, and he was in not such great health. So it was ultimately a life sentence that he was given
Yes.
for the second-degree murder. We believed in our heart of hearts that he wasn't guilty of second-degree murder. There was a death, but it should have been manslaughter, and which is what we offered to the prosecutor at the very beginning. And And so then we get it remanded, and it comes back, and the prosecutor gives us the offer of pleading to manslaughter. And so all of that work, and we're back to where we began, where we knew where the truth was and what happened. That whole process, I was looking at this the other day. I think it took like 3 years from the time of the crime until we got it remanded and he got resentenced.
Yes. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really takes a lot of the patience on his part.
Yeah.
You know, you get an 80-year sentence and you want to give up.
Yes.
And when you're in the penitentiary, not that I've been there for any length of time other than to see a client,
Right.
I can only imagine that there's a part of that where it is all about survival. And it's you figuring out how you survive at a place like that. So it's interesting. And I know how grateful he was that we did everything we could for him. Yeah. And sometimes when you try a case, you're not trying it to the jury. You're trying it to the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. It was the effort that we took to make sure that certain evidence got in, and we pointed that out to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals that allowed us to get the remand and get the conviction overturned. So it was that was a whole office ordeal because, I remember coming back after that was at least a week-long jury trial.
Yeah.
And on the last day we came back and everybody sat around. There were about 5 of us. The boss, the chief deputy, and you and I, and we sat around and did the jury instructions.
Yep.
How do we want to frame the arguments that we're making, not to the jury, but to the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals? So you can't just think about what's right in front of you. You got to think 2 or 3 steps down the road. And that's really how we were fortunate enough to get that conviction overturned.
Right. Things I learned from that was never give up.
Right.
And it was worth it because we saved a life,
Right.
So if anything, I can say I did something good and you taught me how to do it. So
Right. Right.
it feels good. Being a public defender, you don't always have those victories. You don't always get the not guilty verdict or the, conviction overturned. That's a very rare occurrence.
Yes. I will tell you that people ask me how many times have you won?
Yeah.
It's hard to answer that question. I think I've won every time that one of my clients comes to me. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
I understand everything that happened to me. I understand there's a consequence to be paid for the decisions I've made. I'm not necessarily happy about those things, but I know that I understood everything that's going on.
Right.
Right. And I understand why the judge did what he did. Or maybe I don't, but I know that you did everything you could to fight against it.
Exactly. So when you walk into the office of the Sarpy County Public Defender's Office, there's cards all over the walls, just littering the walls in the best of way. They're framed by Shelley, who does a great job. But and probably 70% of those, if not more, are by convicted criminals.
Right.
But they're thanking their public defender for the job that we did.
Right. We want everybody to know that walks in there is that we're human too, and we appreciate the acknowledgement that we did everything we could for them and how much that means to us. And we do that by framing those letters and the cards that we get sent and putting those on the walls for everybody to see. When you come in, you can't help but look at them. It's covering almost every inch of the lobby of our office. And it's one of the things that we've done, I think, that is very positive. Because even every day you go out the door to go to court, you have to go through that lobby and you have to look at those letters.
Yeah.
And you know that there are people out there, maybe not all of them,
Right.
but there's some of them, right?
It's a nice little reminder of what you've done.
Right. Yeah. I don't do this for the acknowledgement from my clients or the pay. I do this because it's the right thing to do.
Yep. Absolutely.
Right.
One other accomplishment you have in life, if we can just touch on it, is just you being a father. So you've done all of this and while you're a father to some really great kids.
Yeah.
And the first time I ever met the twins was when you were pulling them in a red wagon because you were on the campaign trail for Steve, your brother.
Yes.
So I just wanted to to touch on the fact that Not only are you a bulldog in the courtroom and you put so much of your time into being a fabulous attorney, you also have this home life and you're raising kids and have done a great job. So,
Well, I appreciate that.
yeah.
I have 3 children, and they're all very special to me. The last 2 are about to graduate from high school, and I know
How'd that happen?
yeah, it was like 20 minutes ago they were being born.
Yep.
So, and they had to call me at work to tell me that was happening. I still remember that day. Yep. Greatest day of my life.
Yeah, I bet. They're precious.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people a lot of times like to hear from attorneys is war stories. So do you have any cases or, you don't have to get too specific if you don't want, but anything that, that you think that sits with you? Any cases or memories of, being a public defender?
Well, there's one. Well, there's many cases. The one that kind of sticks out to me is representing the gentleman who's been accused of sexually assaulting his daughter for years. And he wanted to have a trial, so my job is to have a trial. And we're in the second week of this trial that went 2 full weeks. And he comes to court with black eyes. I said, "What happened?" He goes, "Well, Chris, they were talking bad about you. I had to defend you."
So he was so loyal to you that he stood up for you in the jail, knowing that, and that's hugely significant because he would probably get more charges for that.
Yes.
And he still went to bat for you because he knew you were
Yes.
going to bat for him. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's when you're doing a good job. And I remember that case. That case stuck with a lot of us in the office. It didn't turn out the way that he wanted.
No.
He ended up getting hundreds of years of
214.
yeah. But he still knew that you were a great lawyer and did everything you could.
He knew I was fighting for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That reminds me of doing juvenile court cases. No, kids seem to me to be the hardest to break through to. But one of the things that I always remembered from watching you is you had to get proximate with your clients. You always went into the jail and met with your clients. There were so many other attorneys that I have witnessed that would not go into the jail. They just wanted to have a phone call, which is not good because if the person at the jail that's on the phone talking to their client, there's people or to their attorney, there's people around them listening. So there's,
Right.
that's not confidential. And you taught me how important it was to meet with my clients and have it confidential, but to actually be there and look at them in the whites of their eyes, So it's things like that I'm sure made your clients fight for you in the jail because they knew that you were, doing things that other attorneys weren't out there doing.
Well, I always try to be different. I mean, I don't remember a lot from law school. I wasn't ever the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
But nobody outworked me.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I'm there too.
And yeah, a couple of things I remember is that they're scared, right? And maybe Tom Riley taught me that. The first thing is these guys are scared. They're sitting in jail and they're looking at going to jail for what they perceive to be forever, even though it may just be a couple of months, but it's forever,
Right.
even on minor cases. And that you have to respect that. That's their fear. And it's not my job to determine whether or not it's a good fear or an exaggerated fear.
Right.
Right. So I always try and make sure that I let them talk and let them explain their situation and make sure that I'm listening to them and not playing with my phone or anything else. The problem we're having now is that our caseloads are getting so big, it's hard to do that. To get, to get into the jail to see somebody, you may want to talk to them for an hour or so, but it takes a half hour, 45 minutes to go through all the process.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that we're doing that. So the caseloads are making it more difficult to do that, and the cases are becoming more complex. Yeah.
So one of my favorite stories to tell people about you, because I think it's just hilarious and true. And it just popped into my brain, so that's why I'm sharing it. As um, when you were doing private work, so the public defenders now can't do private cases anymore, correct? Yeah.
Correct.
But
In Sarpy County.
in Sarpy County, yeah. But when I was there, we could take private cases, and there was a private case for a client. It was a pretty major case, but the guy was out on bond, and so we went to meet with him at your office, and you had asked me to, come help on the case to get experience for me, and so you introduced me to the client, and you say, "This is Mandy Grolke. She's a great attorney. I've taught her everything she knows." And I don't think it could have been more spot on. And I appreciated the fact you said I was a great attorney. And I truly believe you thought that. Like, you've always been so respectful and kind, but encouraging to me. And you've always told me what my strengths are. And it's been so helpful, and it's helped me believe in myself, because I didn't always have the most confidence. But I also know you knew that you did teach me almost every trick there is in the book. And you helped me to become a great attorney. And so I loved that. I love that introduction.
Yeah. Well, you have always been very smart. You're very intelligent, and it was obvious from the very beginning that you had those abilities. That was never my forte. My stick in the bag, as they say, was being very hardworking.
Yeah.
Work ethic. And so I always tried to make sure that I outworked the other side. I may not have outthought them, but I needed people like you to help me outthink them.
Right. Yeah.
And so I always make sure that those people are around so that I can bounce ideas off of them.
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, but I'll let you stick to that. But it was always fun to collaborate on cases. And that's one of the things I miss working in the public defender's office, is the Wednesday lunch meetings, where every Wednesday we'd order in lunch, and all the attorneys knew that's when we all sat around the lunch table and talked about cases and commiserated about, issues within the criminal justice system, and really tried to brainstorm good defenses for certain cases. And it was a bonding period for those in our, a bonding time for all of us. And it was also, it's heavy stuff being a public defender. Like, these cases are hard. And I think if the general population knew the crimes that were being committed out there in the world, they'd lock up their children constantly. They would stay at home at night. Like, there is some heavy stuff out there.
Yep.
But it was a time for us to all come together and kind of make it a little lighter. And I do miss that part of being a public defender.
Yeah, you have to decompress.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, even handling the cases that I did, because there was about, I think for 3 years, I did all the sexual assaults that came into the office. That was very difficult, especially with my kids. There are things that people don't think twice about doing with their children that I have to call into question, because I can see how this can be turned into a crime.
Yeah.
And it's all innocent. Yeah, it's very, it sets you back sometimes.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why it was so important that we did have those times to come together and just kind of share in it all together. So.
Yeah, and we were lucky that the guy running the office was aware of that stuff. Wanted to make sure that compassion fatigue, which is something I believe really happens, because I've seen it, is kept an eye out for. So when the attorneys get a little worn out, we can rotate them into a less stressful position, so that as your case roll was designed to be 18 months to 3 years. Some people lasted 18 months. The person doing it now has been in there probably 6 years.
Oh, wow.
But is really doing a nice job, and seems to have a good balance about it.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's important. And everybody reacts to those cases differently. And there's always one that'll hit you harder than the rest, and you don't even expect it. But
Right.
and one of the things with being a public defender is oftentimes we work harder than our clients do. Often.
Yeah.
But you just wake up every day, like you said, to do the right thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, 45 minutes goes really fast.
Are we there yet?
Yeah, I think we're there yet. So thank you so much for coming on, Chris. It was important to me that the people that listen to my podcast and my followers meet you.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, you've been so impactful in my life, and I look forward to years to come,
Yes.
friendship and everything. So thank you.
Yes, my pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody that came to listen to this episode of Grateful by Lady Law. You can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcast or anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, and you can watch us on YouTube. Until next time, see you later.
A Huda Media Production.